Welcome to Upwards, sponsored by the Microsoft Aspire Experience, where we share stories and insights to help you grow 1% better in your personal and professional life every episode. Here are your hosts for today's episode, Jay Cusin and Jay Lee.
Hey. Thanks for coming back for another Upwards episode. Today, I am here with Mr. Jake Houston. Jake, who do we have on the episode today?
Hey, Jay, and hello, Upwardians. I'm making it my goal to refer to our listeners as Upwardians every single episode. If any episode we don't say Upwardians, it has to be completely re-edited, but I'm super stoked, Jay. We have a phenomenal guest, John Moe, with us. And John, to be honest, is probably the most interesting person that I've ever met. He currently is a chief architect at Microsoft, working on modern workplace and our tools and technologies for US federal, but has an incredible career going from Xbox Live to even, I feel like if you're a sponsored and featured skateboarder, you're a professional skateboarder. So I'm definitely going to refer to John as a professional skateboarder, even if he doesn't. But really, really cool career and just very interesting insights and stories he has to share for you all. So I'm really excited for you all to take a listen, and let's roll it. Hey, John, how you doing? Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Jay.
Good to see both of you. Yeah, got a lot of Jays in the room.
Yeah, actually, I don't think we've ever had an episode with everyone that has the same first letter that starts with a name. So that's actually really funny that you pointed that out, Jay. So John, I kind of want to kick things off and start with something that's not traditional with all of our guests. Usually we kind of go straight into career and your background and different roles, but something that I find so fascinating and so cool is your background in skateboarding. And for our listeners that don't know, John has been formerly featured in Thrasher magazine and used to be sponsored by Vans shoes, which I think is so crazy because I have way too many pairs of Vans. And I would actually argue that owning a pair of Vans is just as common as owning a pair of Nikes nowadays. Like, I'm even wearing a Vans shirt right now. Like, that's how common this brand is. So I think it's mind blowing that you used to be sponsored by Vans shoes for skateboarding. And I'd love to kick things off, John, with just sharing more about your background in skateboarding and even how you got into it for our listeners.
Yeah. So, I'm a pretty curious person by nature. And I think I saw somebody on a skateboard and I was like, hey, that looks pretty fun. And I just kind of got into it. And, I grew up in the South in Louisiana, Metairie, Louisiana, to be specific. And there wasn't too many skateboarders there, but I really got into it and just kind of took off with it. And then eventually through, I guess, different contests and things, I got discovered, if you want to use that word, and I got sponsored by a lot of different companies, and Vans was definitely one of them. Vision Skateboards, Vision Streetwear was another, Venture Trucks, so a whole bunch of different sponsors, and that kind of took my life as a young Asian American kid growing up in the South, rather than following what I would like to call the default normal path of studying really hard, going to college, where, I was sponsored, I was in magazines, videos, all kinds of stuff. And eventually when I was like 19, I basically moved out of my house and went to go live in San Francisco with a bunch of friends. And I just kind of did that instead of going to college. And parents didn't really like that because I didn't fit into what I was supposed to be fitting in, but I did it anyway because I was curious and that made me happy. So that's how I kind of ended up being a skateboarder in magazines as well as having sponsorships.
And how did you balance those expectations with family, friends, the Asian American stereotype?
Jay, that's a great question because I don't think I really did. And there's this, concept of, I think, called context collapsing, where one part of your identity is this and another part is that. I usually didn't try to mix the skateboarder John Moe with the Asian American John Moe in that community, just because I know it wasn't well received. Unlike today, I just saw the Olympics and they had skateboarding in there, and I was like, wow, the world has changed, right? I should have been born later, but definitely was difficult. But because I was different and because I didn't fit into this default normal sort of expectations of what I think the world was putting for my identity as an Asian American, it was difficult. But I think I just didn't care. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I just kept on pushing.
Just kept on being curious. That's awesome. And how long did this curiosity last? Moving along with the timeline, when did you transition out of skateboarding?
Eventually, it's not that I didn't like it anymore. I was just kind of done with it. And then I said, hey, as I get older, I probably should go to college. I probably should figure out a path forward. So I ended up going to college and studied speech, and then eventually got a job and found another curiosity of mine, which is technology. And I've always been curious about technology, but eventually switched over to the IT field. And after a few years of doing it at different places, startups, I ended up at Microsoft. And that's how I came to Microsoft.
That's awesome. And looking back, would you change anything about that, John? Like you said, you didn't take up the norms in terms of going to college or university or studying right away, and took up skateboarding, and which I'm sure you have a lot of really cool experiences, stories, met a lot of really cool people from it. But would you go back and change anything? Like try to go to school while you're skateboarding, or is there anything you changed, or I guess has making that decision impacted where you're at today in your career journey for the better?
Yeah, I definitely would not change a thing. There wasn't anything that I did when I was skating that I'm ashamed of. I didn't do anything illegal or anything too crazy, but I know that it was something that I wanted to do. And the world wasn't such that it was accepting of what I was doing. But, again, I didn't care. And I think what's going on in the world today, when people are different and they're marginalized because they are different, I think we could do better. So for me, no, I wouldn't change a thing. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned over the years, that there are a lot of different people, a lot of diversity out there, and we should be more accepting of who they are so they could bring their authentic selves to work. And we could create wonderful teams with all kinds of different people with different skills so that we could drive outcomes. So I'm a big proponent of be yourself, bring your authentic self, and then let's work together to get things done.
So, John, going along the lines of curiosity and pursuing things that you're curious about, after you started working in IT and in tech and in startups, how did you constantly keep yourself curious and pursue these curiosities?
Yeah, it was a lot of just asking questions. So let me give you a very specific example around one of the things that we as architects talk about at Microsoft. And it's this concept of falling in love with the customer's problem. It could be active, or I'll change the word to aggressive listening. And I'll tell you a quick story. So as a consultant or an architect or principal consultant in the field, one of the things we need to do is drive our group to go and meet with customers and really listen to the things that they're experiencing, their problems, right? And part of doing that is sitting down, of course, listening, but taking really good notes. And then afterwards, sending the notes back to the customer and saying, hey, did we capture everything you wanted to tell us? Did we get it right? Is it correct? So we did that with this customer. Let's just say it's a government customer who may or may not have sued Microsoft in the past. So we did the note taking. Wow. I sent it back. And immediately I got a response back. And that doesn't really happen. Usually it takes a day or so. So I was like, right. Oh, that's interesting. Let me take a look at this email. And the words were, John, we have 243 prosecutors here. We stopped hiring persecutors a long time ago. And it was kind of funny because, this is, like I said, may or may not be the people who sued Microsoft in the past. And, they're a bunch of attorneys, right? And immediately I was like, okay, did I just call these people a bunch of persecutors? Maybe this is that resume generating event people talk about, right? And I thought that for a second. Then I was like, you know what? I need to own up to this. And I immediately replied and said, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. It was a typo. I did not mean to call your folks a bunch of persecutors, your prosecutors. And I tell that story because afterwards, when we got to meet in person, it definitely broke the ice, but they were very impressed with the fact that we were willing to listen to their problems first before coming in with our solutions. Because I think as a technical person, and I've done this myself, and I think many people do, we know our tech, we know our solutions, and we want to share that with the customer. But I think the advice I would give is pause and really try to listen, and to the point of, can you fall in love with their problem? And if you're going to do that, you have to listen. And that's something that I've learned since that point on. And I always try to make sure that, hey, am I listening? Am I taking my understanding of what they're articulating to me and sharing it back with them so they could confirm it, right? And then one other note about active listening, I said change that to aggressive listening, and let me kind of share what I mean by that. So we all know how to listen. I think that's a pretty simple concept, but in the field, when you're representing Microsoft, when you talk to customers, they have their own language. There's definitely different cultures, right? Jake, you know this, when you and I work with DoD, they have their own language. Well, you need to be able to take their problems given to you in their own language and maybe translate it a little bit and then speak the language of engineering so that the engineering folks can understand what is going on in the field. So you're kind of like bilingual in some sense, right? You know the customer language, you know the engineering language, and you need to add value to the things that the customer is telling you when you go back to engineering. Because if you're just doing nothing but a pass-through, you're not adding any value, right? That's what I mean by aggressive listening. And for that to happen, you really need to pay attention to the customer and focus. So,
yeah, that's awesome, John, and can definitely agree with customers have their own language. Engineering may have their own language. There's another language for business outcomes. And I think what you mentioned, not just regurgitating the messages, because that doesn't add value. It's, can you obsess over the customer and really understand their language and then take it and understand, well, how does this translate to Microsoft business outcomes or any company that any listeners might be listening to? And then in your case, if you have to go and relay that message or information to engineering, can you put on the engineering hat and understand their way of communication? So I think that's a really good call out. And you were one of the first people that I work with in the Department of Defense working on digital transformation for them and modern collaboration tools. And you've done really, really badass things like helping ship Xbox Live, which my childhood self thanks you for immensely, John. Do you have any other like key pieces of insight or like key things that you think really helped drive the success of your career? I know the aggressive listening and really listening and being able to understand that message is a key point, but what other insight has really been beneficial and significant in your different roles and different journeys at Microsoft and in your career?
I think the one story I'll share is really about people and technology, not just about technology. As a very technical person, one thing that I've learned over the years is how important your focus is on people. So I'll share another story. So there's this thing called the Exchange Ranger. It was a program that ran for a while. And if you want to find out a little more information, you could go to aka.ms Exchange Ranger, all in one word. But it was one of the most difficult technical endeavors that I've taken on at Microsoft. It was 6 weeks in Redmond, Monday through Friday classes, Saturday all-day labs, and Sunday was devoted to studying because we had essay exams, not multiple choice exams, right? So you really had to know enough to write these essays. And to pass the entire program, you had to finish a full day lab exam. And I think the pass rate was like 25%. It was pretty low.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was pretty hardcore, but I enjoyed it. As a technical person, doing technical deep dives was definitely a joy. It was stressful too, but in the midst of this program, the GM who ran the program, who also I believe was the GM at Exchange, came out and wanted to talk to all the students. And this is before anybody passed or failed, right in the middle. So all of us are thinking, wow, we're going to get the GM of Exchange and of this program coming out, and I'm sure he is going to tell us all these technical secrets. Maybe we're going to look at more source code, figure something out, right? Everybody was excited. But he got everybody into a room, and what he said really kind of helped me figure out this is the right way to do it. He said, customers will remember how they felt when working with you more than what you did for them. Now, think about the context. He knows that these are the most technical, smartest, whatever you want to call it, people who are coming to this program, and he's not talking tech at all. He's talking about how you interact and work with customers. Now, let me be very clear. We're not saying that technical delivery is unimportant, because it is, right? We're Microsoft. We had to bring the best of what we know to the customer space to get things done. But what he's talking about is that is expected, and it's actually not enough, because in this new world of the cloud, it's really about customer experience and to drive really delightful customer experience, you have to understand the people side of things and how you work with people, right? So that's something that, Jake, you and I, when we were working with DoD, something that I kept in mind to say, what are we doing to make it easy and convenient to be clear and understand the people side of things? Because, for end users, they don't care about technical features and capabilities. They just want a tool to get their job done faster, better, more efficiently. And you can't just always put on your technical hat and just go at it, right? You have to understand the people side of it. So it may be common knowledge, but again, for me, it made a lasting impression because this was like the most technical context that I've been in, and it really wasn't about technology at all. So definitely focus in your career on technology if you're a technical person, or if you're a PM, focus on the PM piece. But to the degree that you invest your time into those skills, invest the same amount, if not more, on honing in your people skills.
And love that piece where it's not just if you're a technical person or if you're someone who deals with customers. It's like no matter what role you are, and for our listeners, no matter what company you're at, that's kind of the point of the tech industry, right? Everyone's here because there's some problem that you want to solve, and those problems create business for everyone. So if you're doing that anyways, might as well ground yourself in what the customer solution is and how their experience is on the end user side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like what you said, John, about to some listeners, like people skills, improving your communication skills may be common knowledge, but a lot of times even I find that just because it's common knowledge doesn't mean it's like knowledge that action is taken upon, where it's on paper how to be a good leader or how to be a good teammate or communicate well might seem common knowledge, but it's so much more difficult sometimes to put that into practice. And I'm curious, John, again, when we've worked together on the DoD, something I was always so impressed about is what you mentioned. I was like, I know John is a technical expert. I know John has a wealth of technical experience, but I was like, I've never seen someone communicate and try to relate so well to customers and the people around you. Is there anything that you specifically did to improve your people skills or to communicate better, or anything that you really tried to focus on outside of like the listening part is so key when it comes to relating to individuals. But for any early in careers listening that might be in a technical role or a technical field where they're very much so focused on learning those technical skills, but want to start improving those people skills, what are your thoughts on that?
First, change the narrative from calling communication skills as soft skills. It is a hard skill. First, it is a hard skill. It is something that you're going to have to practice. You're going to have to invest in, right? And for me, it's just practicing, learning from people, maybe even inviting feedback from people around you so that you can learn from them, and then watching people who communicate well and know that this isn't something that you're going to get a degree in and you're done. This is a lifelong skill that you could hone and fine tune because it will help you, especially as you grow in your career. Your ability to communicate one-on-one to a larger group, to give a presentation. Also, listening is a huge part of that, right? So that's something you're going to have to keep working on as well. So for early career folks, I would say definitely, again, to the degree you work on your craft, whether it's technical, whether it's program management, whether it's whatever, spend time doing the same effort on the hard skills of communication. That's what I would say.
And on that note, these types of skills, you're not really taught in school or in whatever kind of schooling you took. So what would you recommend for early in careers who get thrown first day on the job, or like, oh, give this presentation, or you're going to be leading this meeting or that meeting? What would you recommend them to do to slowly build a development path on improving their communication skills?
I would say community. And what I mean by that is get involved in some community where you could, one, practice those skill sets, two, learn from other people. And you're right. I mean, I'm a speech major, right? That's what I studied as an undergrad. And I learned plenty of theory as well as did plenty of public speaking as well. But it wasn't until that I was able to get into a community, learn from others, that I got a little bit better. And I'm still learning, right? Still learning today. So I think, again, it's something that you want to keep investing in because it will definitely help you as you grow in your career.
Absolutely. And something that kind of stood out to me, John, that a mentor of mine mentioned to me that helps others with communication skills and especially technical individuals. And something that I felt too, that was kind of like a big light bulb aha moment, was like, you can be a 7, 8, 9, 9.5, getting close to 10 out of 10 with your technical skills, whether that is like truly technical skills, coding, what be it, or just the technical skills of your craft. But if you can only communicate like out of 3 out of 4 out of 10, where do you think people are going to see your value at? It's going to be much closer to the ability you're able to communicate at. So I couldn't agree with you more when it comes to putting the same amount of effort and desire towards those people communication skills, hard communication skills, as you do your technical skills. Because I still don't think it gets talked about enough, but I think it's something that is starting to get talked about more and more, especially when it comes to tech.
Absolutely.
And thinking about people with different abilities here too, what if you're limited by your physical abilities on verbal communication? What would you recommend on written communication or other types of communication? How could people hone those skills, and how would those skills play a role in your career?
I think communication isn't, as you pointed out, just one sort of modality. There's a lot of different ways you could get involved. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm looking at digital media and let's say even just video storytelling as a technique that kind of helps people who may not have a voice out there because maybe they don't have a fancy title or maybe they're brand new to Microsoft. I'm working on that as a way to kind of give them a voice. So, for example, I think it was with a indigenous ERG group and a bunch of other communities within Microsoft where I'm sort of lending my hobbyist type video storytelling skills to say, hey, let's get your message out there and kind of enable them to speak and have a voice out there. So I think if you're uncomfortable with public speaking, for example, which I know a ton of people are, there are other ways to improve your communication skills, whether it be video storytelling, whether it be writing, which is very important because we send a ton of emails and chats all day long, right? So being very efficient and powerful with the way you write is also a great skill. I think one thing I'll share is one of my professors at grad school said, hey, your writing should be athletic. He talked about it being sort of to the point. He said, don't do this lethargic type, overblown classical writing. And when I read that, and I was like, yeah, that is correct. You want to be able to communicate very concisely, very precisely, because in business, we need to do that. We need to be very effective. We need to be very powerful to the degree we can to get things done. And communication is a huge part of it. As Jake pointed out, all the wonderful technical skills you have can be blocked by your inability to communicate well.
Yeah. On the other hand, too, I think putting the effort into improving those communication skills, on one hand, it could be a blocker. But on the other hand, when you work on it, I find that it really does amplify all those wonderful skills and traits that someone has when they work on those communication skills. And I really like how you mentioned, like, it doesn't have to be trying to go find 100-person audience to go speak in front of to improve your communication skills and get practice, especially for those that are a bit nervous. I, like myself, when I started my communication journey, I'm very naturally introverted, and that is not what I wanted to do. So when you mentioned like video storytelling, that's really what I leaned on, is just recording videos of myself speaking to get in that habit, and even just replaying videos. I know some people like do blogs on YouTube or do videos for social media, and I think that that's even better because others can actually see your communication skills and you can elicit feedback. But for me, it literally started just recording minute or 2-minute videos on my iPhone of what I did during the day, what I had for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and literally just recording it, and then a day or two later going back and just seeing like, hey, did I communicate the way I wanted to? What could I improve? And just focusing on small things. So I agree. It's not just about a live audience. Video storytelling, there's many ways you can work on the art of communication skills.
Absolutely.
And so, John, you've done so much. Throughout your career, after you transitioned from skateboarding into tech, into working with DoD, Xbox, etc. If you were to look back at this journey so far, what has been the most important to you, life-wise or career-wise?
I think when I look back, there's 3 things that stands out. One is helping people. Go and help people. And I think in helping people, you will find maybe that a curiosity area that you haven't seen before. And maybe that curiosity will turn into a passion. But go help people. I think that'll give you an opportunity to discover new things. The other is drive happiness. And maybe happiness is not the best word. Maybe joy is a better word. But I've worked in some very stressful situations, but I've seen people just do their best to make it a pleasant experience. And that's just being a human being and looking at everybody as people instead of just a customer or just a partner or whatever, right? So help people, go drive happiness. And the other piece, kind of reflecting back to what I said earlier, I'll use the word healing. And what I mean by that is when I look back throughout the career, there's been times where I felt like, you know what, I should have stood up and said something. Or, you know what, I should have maybe not said something. Because again, you heard me talk about diversity and inclusion early on, and it's very meaningful to me just because, like I said, I was marginalized. I didn't fit the default normal for one of my identities as an Asian American, and it wasn't that pleasant. So when you look back, are there opportunities where you could have made a difference? And if so, put a mental mark on that. And when that opportunity comes up again, do something different, take action, right? If you make sense of it, go make it meaningful by taking action. So I would say go help people, drive happiness, and think about how you can heal the situations of the past to make it better for the future.
Thanks for sharing that, John. I think it's pretty cool for this episode. I mean, we started in the past, and I mean, all the way to your like teen years with skateboarding and stories and insights that you've had through your awesome career. What's next? And not even like necessarily role or career path, but what are you excited about doing or continuing to do as we look forward in the future for your career and just life in general?
You know, I want to keep learning. I'm going to keep listening and working on my listening skills and just keep living. But let me share another story of what's going on with me today as I'm in a master's degree program at USC studying digital media. And the story is, you know, when I took the job at Xbox Live many years ago, you know how at the end of the interview, the interviewer says, "Hey, you have any question for me?" So I was like, okay, yeah, I got some questions. And I asked, you know, what brings you into Xbox? What gets you up in the morning every day to go to Xbox for work? And thinking like, well, you probably get free Xboxes. That's true. You probably get to play video games during the day. Yep, that's true. You probably get video games for free. All of that is true. But he paused for a second and he said, I get to make tens of millions of people happy every day. And I thought about that. I was like, you know, that's true. That's the power of digital media, whether it be games, whether it be music, you know, whatever, right? Cinematic arts. And that was one of the things that really motivated me to say, you know what, I'm going to take this job at Xbox Live because I'm not a gamer. I don't play video games. I was very interested in the technology behind something as huge as Xbox Live, but also with the ability to take something like that and just make an impact in people's lives, right? So for me, when I was younger, right after undergrad, I did start at Johns Hopkins studying applied behavioral science, but I kind of gave it up because it was kind of expensive and took too much time. Now, it's not that I have more time, but I was like, it's not too late. I need to go back and study something that I'm curious about, and I'm definitely curious about digital media. So I'm learning. I'm enjoying the program. It's very difficult. I have to balance a lot of things, but I'm learning. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep working on my listening skills, how to better fall in love with the customer's problem, do aggressive listening. And then living is really about, look what's going on in the world today. A lot of difficult things are happening. A lot of crazy things are happening. We need to get out there. We need to get involved, find meaning in all the things that we see, and find a way to contribute, find a way to listen, find a way to be aware of things maybe you weren't aware of before. But that's all part of living. So in the future, I'm going to keep learning, keep listening, keep living. That's the way I would say it.
John, you have given like a ton of actionable insight throughout this episode, but something that we always like to end the episode on is just one little nugget, one simple thing that someone could do like right after listening to this episode to take action on something that was discussed, whether it be this general theme of the episode or just a topic we talked about. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think is something that any of our listeners early in careers could do after listening to this episode to just practice curiosity, become more curious, or even if someone is already curious, maybe turn that curiosity into something actionable? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Go join a community. There's tons of communities out there, whether it be you're curious about better communication, curious about a technology, whatever it is. And in fact, I will say even internally inside of Microsoft, we're taking this approach of, holding sort of learning events or training, not for the sake of just learning, but to launch a community, because we understand that when you get people together and when they establish a rapport and relationship, that is more important than just technology learning, because technology learning now definitely has a shorter shelf life with the cloud, right? Things change so quickly. And what we want to do even inside of Microsoft is to build these communities so that when we have difficult customer problems and opportunities to jump on, it goes to a community of people that could work together to solve them. And in working together with other people, you will find things that you're curious about, things that you're passionate about, and even find things like, I don't want to do anything related to that, right? But it happens through the community. So I would encourage everybody to go join a community, whatever it is. There's plenty out there, even a virtual community with what's going on in the world today, and get involved and go help people, like I said earlier.
John, that was fantastic. We loved hearing about your story and all the advice that you have for us. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, Jake, that was just such a great talk with John.
It was epic.
Yeah,
it was
such
epic.
a cool guy. Pro skateboarder and then went to college for tech. Wow. Maybe that's what people should do these days. Go pursue your passions before pursuing schooling.
I wanted to be a pro skateboarder, honestly, but yes, I was like obsessed with skateboarding, but clearly not as good as John was. I know. I should have gotten lessons from John maybe in a different life.
That's fair. Yeah, kind of just thinking back about what we talked about, one of the things that I really love that John mentioned was how you make people feel. No matter what your role is, whether you're in tech and consulting and consumer products, etc., what you do at any specific moment, people aren't going to remember that as well as how they felt when you were doing that for them and how your interactions are. So that's something that I'm going to take away, to think about how I communicate with people, how I present myself, and how that reflects back onto them.
That's such a good chunk there, Jay. And I thought it was so interesting when John mentioned, I think it's so cool that not only has he been a skateboarder, but helping ship Xbox Live, which
so cool.
Me and all of my friends and millions of individuals in the world can thank him for being a part of that. But when he mentioned that he doesn't enjoy video games, John doesn't play video games. And even for me reflecting, I would imagine if someone wants to work on Xbox, they probably really love video games and likely enjoy Xbox, but at the least really enjoy video games. But it's actually the complete opposite for John. But he was able to find a deeper meaning of millions of people play video games, and how can I be a part of millions of people's happiness and fueling that. So I think it's just one of the many nuggets I think John gave us of not confining yourself to a mold or a norm, and that anyone listening is more than that. And don't be afraid to push those boundaries and explore and use your curiosity to kind of fuel breaking that norm. So just overall, really, really interesting.
Yeah. And now we can kind of go back and think about how we can be more curious in our post-college adult lives.
Exactly.
As always a pleasure. So I'll see you in the next episode.
See you, Upwardians.
Thanks for listening to Upwards. Be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and leave us a review. Learn more about the Microsoft Aspire experience at aka.ms/Microsoft Aspire experience. We'll catch you next time on Upwards.